Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're exploring a religion that's pretty well known for its message of world unity. But, and this is the fascinating part, its history is actually defined by prophecy, rebellion, and a pretty bitter family feud that literally tore it in two.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the messianic excitement that really set the stage. Then we'll see how the Bab's fiery revelation sparked a whole new movement. After that, we'll get into the war between brothers that almost destroyed everything. From there, we'll look at the super rigid chain of command they built to stop another split, the faith's grand vision for a new world order, and finally, the modern challenges that make you question its methods.
All right, our story actually begins not with the Baha'i Faith itself, but with an Islamic school of thought that created this incredibly fervent atmosphere, just waiting for a divine messenger.
And this idea, it was absolutely electric. I mean, picture it, 19th century Persia. Shaykhism comes along and teaches that there's always a living person on earth, a gate, who connects humanity directly to God. This wasn't just some abstract theory. It created this real, urgent expectation. People weren't just passively waiting for a Messiah, they were actively looking for him. And then, in 1844, that expectation was met. A young merchant from Shiraz stepped forward, and his claims would just ignite a fire all across Persia. This man, the Bab, declared he was the one they'd all been waiting for and that he was kicking off a whole new religious cycle. And his message spread like wildfire. Thousands of followers flocked to him, which, as you can imagine, provoked a brutal reaction from the state and the clergy. They saw him as a heretic, and this conflict led to these widespread massacres and, in the end, his own public execution in 1850.
Now, this new faith wasn't just some peaceful spiritual movement. No, it was militant. The Bab's holy book, the Bayan, laid out a plan for a radical and, frankly, violent break from the old world. It actually called for the elimination of non-Babis and the total destruction of their sacred places to clear the way for his new world order.
So, you're probably wondering, how do you square that kind of violence with a message of peace? Well, years later, Baha'u'llah, who would go on to found the Baha'i Faith, he offered an explanation. He basically argued that the Bab's harsh laws were never meant to be permanent. They were a shock tactic, a way to violently sever ties with the old world to make room for his own, much more peaceful message. So, with the Bab executed, his movement faced this huge question. Who's in charge now? And this power vacuum, well, it was not going to be filled peacefully. The years right after the Bab's death were just pure chaos. I mean, look at this timeline. By the 1850s, you had at least 25 different people claiming to be his successor. Now, officially, the leadership was supposed to go to the Bab's designated heir, a young guy named Mirza Yahya. But in reality, his much older, much more charismatic half-brother, Baha'u'llah, he became the community's de facto leader. And this set the stage for a really devastating confrontation. So you've got this impossible rivalry between two half-brothers. On one side, you have Subhi Azal, the guy the Bab officially named as his successor. And on the other, you have Baha'u'llah, who claimed that he was the great prophet the Bab had only hinted at. This wasn't just some theological debate, it turned into a personal, violent war that would rip the faith apart. The infighting got so vicious that the brothers started publicly accusing each other in front of the Ottoman authorities. Baha'u'llah was even accused by his brother's supporters of trying to poison him. It was a complete and irreconcilable split, creating two rival factions, the Azalis, who stuck with the Bab's designated successor, and the Baha'is, who followed Baha'u'llah and would eventually grow to be much, much larger. To make sure a catastrophic split like that could never, ever happen again, Baha'u'llah came up with a unique system of succession. It was designed to be absolutely unbreakable. This system is known as the Covenant, and it created a really clear, divinely ordained chain of command. Authority would pass from Baha'u'llah to his son, Abdul Baha, then to his great-grandson, Shoghi Effendi, and finally to an elected council, the Universal House of Justice. The whole point was to achieve absolute unity, enforced by an unchallengeable line of authority. And if you dared to challenge this line of succession, you were branded a covenant breaker. This is, without a doubt, the most serious offense in the faith. The punishment is complete excommunication. Believers are commanded to shun these people, cutting off all social contact, even if they're your own close family members. And here's the crazy irony. The system that was designed to prevent division was enforced through even more division, and this time it was inside the founder's own family. Baha'u'llah's own sons were kicked out for challenging their brother. Then, decades later, the next leader, Shoghi Effendi, excommunicated pretty much his entire family. It really proved that absolute loyalty to the institution was way more important than blood ties.
And the language they used against these dissenters, many of whom were, again, the faith's own founding family, was incredibly harsh. Dissent wasn't just a disagreement. It was framed as this profound spiritual evil. Relatives were literally being labeled as the incarnation of Satan.
Okay, so having established this ironclad internal structure, the faith outlines an equally ambitious plan for the entire world, a vision of global governance under its direct authority. This internal system of control is pretty much a mirror image of the faith's ultimate political goal. The plan, as Shoghi Effendi described it, is a world federal system, basically a global Baha'i theocracy that would one day replace all secular governments and wield unchallengeable authority over the whole planet. So, how does this grand century-old vision really hold up today? Well, for a growing number of critics, the reality on the ground looks very, very different. In the West especially, the faith is facing a serious crisis of growth. A 2007 report from the U.S. Baha'i community, for instance, revealed a staggering 50% drop in new members over a 10-year period. At the same time, the number of people leaving the faith was going up. And these trends are happening alongside a growing mountain of criticism. A lot of it coming from former believers. They point at things like the ongoing use of shunning, the permanent ban on women serving on the faith's highest governing body, teachings that label homosexual as a treatable illness, and what they describe as a culture of censorship and surveillance. This perspective from a former member really highlights a core tension, doesn't it? In the age of the internet, the faith's complicated history of violent splits and its really strict internal control mechanisms are becoming harder and harder to square with its public message of peace and unity for all. And that leaves us with a fundamental question. And it's not just for the Baha'i Faith, but really for any group, any nation, or any ideology. Where exactly is the line between protecting unity and just enforcing conformity? It's a question that was born from a prophecy of a united world and a history filled with division.